When the young literary editor Richard Seaver returned to the United States after several seminal years in Paris, he came armed with knowledge from France that would reshape America's ideas about modern literature. He brought something more important: enthusiastic advocacy. Canape discusses his importance with his partner, editor, and widow, Jeannette.
For me, it was a great adventure to come to America. I had a wonderful scholarship grant to study at Juilliard School, and so we began our American life. Grove Press was a new, young publishing house that Barney Ross had bought that from two people, and there were like 3 writers on the back list. When Dick joined Grove very soon thereafter in the United States, all these people came. Of course, Henry Miller was now being published, and that's a whole, we go into the second decade, the 60s, where Barney, bless his heart, fought for 10 years with Dick in the US courts to fight censorship. It was a long, drawn-out battle that cost a great deal of energy and money to Grove, but they won. Bill was passed, and it's thanks to Dick and Barney for the past, whatever, decades. American has been enjoying freedom to publish, which is completely taken for granted today, but it's thanks to those two mavericks. The project came on the table, and they approached several people. They approached Harold Pinter. They arrived at Beckett, and Beckett said, okay. And he wrote a film called Film. And he always liked the silent American film. He was fascinated by Harold Lloyd, Laurel and Hardy, on and on. It was a fascination to him. And certainly Buster Keaton was among them. And Beckett arrived. He understood everything. Then they went to look for the location, so they took their car and they went into Brooklyn until they found this very desolate under a bridge in Brooklyn. And they set up camp there. And Beckett loved America. He was just there 1 week, but loved it. He was very excited by New York. And Buster Keaton, interestingly, was not a literary guy at all. And we were thinking, how is that going to turn out? Well, man of instinct and intuition, he got it. And he was wonderful. We both met Jeannette at mutual friends in Paris over social small dinners. When Dick published the first book of Jeannette at Grove, by the time it was 1968, there was a Democratic convention, you know, in Chicago. The magazine Esquire hired 4 or 5 brilliant, nutty writers to cover the convention. Burroughs, Allen Ginsberg, Jean Genet, all with a sense of humor. And so it was a wonderful idea. However, Monsieur Genet had not been given entry to the United States. Why? Because in the eyes of the authorities, he had been a convict, an ex-convict, and a very overt, in those days it wasn't what it is today, overt homosexual. It was definitely persona non grata. And then I got a phone call. Hello, ici Jean. I'm in America. So we flew to Chicago, and indeed for a week, there he was, little Jean Genet. It was short, you know, very short. People saluted him, people either recognized him or didn't, but it was perfectly, nothing happened. He went inside the convention with his badge. We were terrified that he'd be arrested. No, it all went very, and he wrote a long series of, as you know, articles covering that convention. Dick had been translating the piece, so we submitted it to Esquire. We were in the Esquire offices, and half the pieces were not going to be printed. It wasn't what they had expected. And you know Jean, he went on tangents about the sex appeal of the policeman, and it just was more than they could cope. All the money that was being made from publishing literature or books was taken in to either pay lawyers or pay for films that didn't work. It no longer worked for Dick in any case. And he said to Barney, I love you, but you can't afford me anymore. And Barney was in disbelief because he loved Dick. It really moved Dick enormously. I mean, they were about to cry. There was a lot of love between those two guys. And Dick was very shaken to have to do that, but he felt it was better for the survival of Grove and for his own survival. And Barney understood that, yeah. He always felt and told me for years that after Beckett, anything he would write from then on for him, for Dick, would seem trivial and inconsequential. Yeah, so that when he started writing his memoir just recently, the joy of writing, I could see, it was enormous, and it touched me, and it made me sad that he hadn't actually written all these years. And but it gave him a great deal of sense of connecting with his own self in a way that was wonderful to watch. Yeah. 5 days before he died, we went to MoMA to see a Van Gogh show, and it was a particularly time of work that Van Gogh did that had a little darker quality. And in one of the vitrines at MoMA, they were showing a letter that Van Gogh was writing to his brother Theo. And in that letter, he talks about the tender hour of twilight, which he was quoting Émile Zola, the French writer, who was also a friend of theirs. And when we came home, Dick said, I found my title. Isn't it? And then he wrote it somewhere, and when he died, we couldn't find it. And I wasn't sure I'd remembered it. And my daughter, finally looking through his jacket, he had written it, scribbled it down on a checkbook. Yeah. I was glad we found it. It's a beautiful title, I think.
In her third feature film, Goodbye First Love, director Mia Hansen Love explores the dynamics of love, passion, and growing up.
To me, it's a movie that comes from the past in a way. After my two previous films, I basically had a feeling I had to do this film if I wanted to move forward. S'il y a rupture, c'est aussi dans le sens où il complète. Pour moi, les deux autres, c'était délibéré de ne pas avoir traité la question de l'amour physique. Dans mes deux films précédents, par exemple, c'est quelque chose que je voulais garder vierge pour ce film-là. Et dans les deux films précédents, j'ai beaucoup plus parlé de l'amour entre adolescentes et des adolescentes et leur père. J'ai parlé de l'enfance, j'ai parlé du deuil. Tandis que là j'ai évoqué quelque chose qui peut aussi avoir avec le deuil, mais d'une manière beaucoup plus charnelle.
Et
regarde comme t'es belle, c'est incroyable.
c'est l'homme de ma vie.
Enfin, Camille, depuis que tu sors avec Sullivan, tu n'arrêtes pas de pleurer.
L'amour, c'est la seule chose qui compte pour moi. C'est ma seule raison de vivre.
Je vais repartir avec Julien et Mathias. On va retourner en Amérique du Sud.
Et Camille, tu vas l'amener?
Je veux pas que tu t'en ailles. Lâche-moi.
Gracias a la vida
Je vais devenir sans toi.
que me ha dado tanto.
Le choix des acteurs est quelque chose d'absolument capital. Pour moi, c'est quasiment la partie, c'est à la fois la partie la plus douloureuse et la plus excitante de la création du film, parce qu'il y a toujours des moments où on a l'impression qu'on ne les trouvera pas et où du coup on est au bord de renoncer au film. Enfin, ça m'est arrivé en particulier sur le personnage de Sullivan. J'ai mis des mois à trouver l'acteur et c'est pour ça que je me suis finalement tournée vers un comédien allemand, parce que je n'ai pas trouvé en France l'acteur qui correspondait à ce que j'imaginais. Enfin, pour moi, c'est sacré, quoi. Le choix des acteurs, c'est quelque chose sur lequel il n'est pas possible de faire le moins de compromis. Je ne pourrais jamais choisir un comédien en fonction de son degré de célébrité. Peut-être un jour, je travaillerai avec des acteurs connus, mais ce ne sera pas la raison pour laquelle je travaille avec eux. Parce que ce sont eux qui donnent l'âme au film. Ils transforment les personnages aussi et ils font que les personnages, à la fin, sont autre chose que ce qu'ils étaient au départ. Donc, pour moi, la question de l'acteur, c'est vraiment la question de l'âme du film et de l'aura, de la présence, et c'est tout.
Qu'est-ce qui vous a mené à l'architecture?
C'est un langage que j'ai l'impression de comprendre mieux que le reste. J'ai tellement de chance de t'avoir trouvé. C'est un miracle.
C'est moi qui ai de la chance. Tu te rends pas compte, tu illumines ma vie.
Et ce que j'essaie de faire dans mes films, c'est de renoncer à aucune nuance, quoi, de préserver la complexité des choses, les paradoxes, les contradictions, et en même temps de les mettre ensemble dans une forme qui est une forme de simplicité ou d'immédiateté. C'est d'avoir à la fois l'immédiateté dans la forme et puis la complexité dans le fond.
Re-established in 1985 in accordance with the wishes of Princess Grace of Monaco, the Ballet de Monte Carlo is comprised of 50 dancers. In February 2012, they landed in the USA.
There was no ballet company in Monaco until 1985. It was in fact the wish of Princess Grace to give back to the Principality of Monaco its official ballet company. But her untimely death made it impossible, and it was her daughter, Princess Caroline of Hanover, that fulfilled her dream and brought back a ballet company to Monaco. But truly, it wasn't until 1992, when Jean-Christope became the artistic director for Le Ballet de Monte Carlo, that the company really blossomed on an international level.
Le travail de chorégraphe, à la différence de l'écrivain ou du peintre, est un travail qui est toujours un travail qui dépend des autres. C'est-à-dire que ce n'est pas un travail solitaire où la relation est directe avec l'œuvre. Elle est transmise d'abord par les danseurs, et puis par un environnement qui est souvent musical et plastique. Et je trouve que c'est la richesse de l'art chorégraphique et c'est ce qui, moi, m'intéresse de ne pas perdre. Au-delà même de l'intérêt que je peux porter à un artiste, ce qui m'intéresse avant tout, c'est la personne avec qui je travaille. Et en gros, je ne peux pas travailler avec un artiste de talent si je ne m'entends pas avec lui. Je dirais même jusqu'à la caricature si je ne peux pas boire un coup avec lui. C'est-à-dire que la dimension de la relation humaine reste pour moi fondamentale. Altro Canto, c'est une pièce que j'ai faite sur la musique de Monteverdi. C'est la première fois que je travaille avec de la musique baroque. Et moi, j'aime bien nommer la musique, c'est-à-dire que j'aime bien la définir d'un point de vue masculin ou féminin. Et la musique de Monteverdi est une musique que je trouve tout à fait androgyne. Et donc, je voulais travailler sur cette, pas ambiguïté, mais ce paradoxe qu'il y a de très fort chez le danseur, où finalement, on s'aperçoit que très souvent, il y a une part de féminité chez les garçons, et puis il y a aussi une part de masculinité chez les femmes. Et d'essayer de creuser et de voir si finalement ce qui est particulier à tout individu, c'est qu'on a tous en soi une part de l'autre, et de travailler sur cette ambiguïté-là, avec, accompagné par Karl Lagerfeld sur les costumes, en lui demandant de travailler aussi sur cette dualité permanente entre le féminin et le masculin. Opus 40, c'est une pièce que j'ai créée à l'occasion de mes 40 ans. Et c'était le 40e ballet que je créais, d'où le titre. Et La Jeunesse, c'est un spectacle que j'avais vu à New York avec Meredith Monk, que j'avais découvert à cette occasion-là, que j'avais trouvé absolument extraordinaire et fascinante, et à qui j'avais demandé si je pouvais utiliser sa musique pour en faire un spectacle moi-même. Et puis c'était surtout une pièce qui, pour moi, voulait parler de la nécessité, lorsqu'on arrive à 40 ans, de faire un petit bilan et de se rendre compte peut-être que cette fameuse adolescence qu'on a laissée derrière nous, on a peut-être un peu de tristesse à l'avoir laissée partir. Et si on ne cherche pas une nostalgie, on se rend compte peut-être aussi que même à 40 ans, il faut essayer de rester le plus adolescent possible.
I'm Mimosa, I'm from Japan. I'm Simone, I'm from Australia. I'm Sivan, I'm from Israel. I'm from Canada, I'm Maud. Frances Murphy from Australia. I'm Erin Paddock.
And where are you from, Erin?
From Houston, actually, originally.
I always say that very often I'm doing ballet for the husband that comes with his wife just because his daughter is doing ballet. And most of the time they're very bored. And I always say that if the husband is happy, then I want something, because I want to do ballet that is not only done for the people that know about ballet, but for people that don't know anything about ballet.
Established in 1884, the Grolier Club was the first organization in America to regularly exhibit books as objects of artistic and historical interest, on a par with paintings and sculpture. The club takes its name after the Renaissance book collector Jean Grolier, famous for lending books to his friends. It should be no surprise, then, that the club recently mounted the extensive exhibit Printing for Kingdom, Empire and Republic, Treasures from the Archives of the Imprimerie Nationale, curated by H. George Fletcher. Canape tours the paradise for Francophile bibliophiles.
The Imprimerie Nationale has the capability of printing some 100 languages and dialects using 64 fonts that they have in different typefaces for areas in Asia principally, and other exotic fonts that they had been involved with going back into the late 16th century. Indeed, they began life as a group of royal printers in Greek, so that the works of Greek classical antiquity and patristics, the works of the Greek fathers of the church could be printed locally in Paris using types created there. What the exhibition from the Imprimerie Nationale does is showcase for the first time outside France one of the world's great typographic establishments. And we have in relatively few pieces of materials, metal, books, documents, copper plates, and so forth, the history of nearly 500 years of typographic experiment and success and maintenance. Everything begins here. These are the Royal Greek typefaces from the 1530s up to 1540, 1541. You have the manuscript on which they're modeled, and you have the work that Garamond did in this first size, the 16 point. What you have with this is really the Renaissance arriving in France in the 1530s under Francois Ier. You have the ability to print the works of Greek classical antiquity in the original language, which previously had to be done using either defective font or had to be imported from Italy. And now this could happen in the capital. Arguably, the most famous, the most important of the proprietary typefaces of the Imprimerie Nationale are the different sizes of type of the Romain du Roi. We have the book commissioned by Louis XIV, the medals of his triumphs, military and civil. We have the copper plates with which they were printed. We have the copper plates and the designs of the letters. We have a whole suite of the punches and matrices, and we have the different sizes created by Grandjean, by Alexandre, and by Luce. So we have everything from 120 point to this microscopically tiny 4-point type. The scholarly enterprise that went on across many of the decades of the 19th century involved linguistic scholars who worked with the engravers, who themselves were very skillful working in metal. They work in steel and copper and lead. What happens principally is that one has a model to work with, so they are national manuscripts, they are national treasures of their own countries. And working with scholars, the engravers created steel punches. It could take one day to create one punch, or it could take a month to create one punch, depending on how elaborate it is. And it takes a great deal of training and skill. One works up a certain amount of speed over time, but it's very labor-intensive and very painstaking. Starting in the latter part of the 19th century, this replication of the type began to be done by machine rather than by hand, but for some 4 centuries before that, it was cast by hand using hand molds, so that the operation of that would require hundreds of thousands of different elements in working with the mold, breaking it open, putting it back together, pouring the lead into it, breaking that out, and you would do perhaps 1 million openings and closings of a hand mold in the course of creating an entire font of type with which you could print large works requiring many pages of composition. I think the most interesting type, so to speak, among the Oriental fonts are the wooden ideograms for Chinese that were created in the 18th century. These are known as the Regent's boxwoods because they're carved in boxwoods. They are wonderful little works of art on their own, and there are 224,000 of them. So there are combinations of all the different elements that go in to constitute an ideogram, and then therefore the objects, the words, the concepts that they represent. They also have preserved certain terms and vocabulary which no longer exist in Chinese, so they are themselves a treasure house of a language that is used in different ways, not quite the same as it was. At the end of the 19th century, we have this volcanic eruption in the book arts. The then director of the Imprimerie Nationale, as it was called at that time and is called to this day, was a man named Arthur Christian, and he determined that they could launch into a whole new area of creation of books which is what we know of for the past century as the artist book or the livre d'artiste, combining the work of poets and writers with artists using fine materials and limited editions, creating works of art in their own right. And this is in many ways virtually the last full-scale operation that survives, with people doing this all day, every day. So they are a full-service book production facility. It used to be extremely common around the world. And considering what has happened by and large over the past generation or generation and a half, it's nothing short of a miracle that so much of this physical material survives and is continuing in use. I'm not talking about the electronic replacement of the book. I'm talking about a different type of physical book. It's a great honor that it is here. It goes to the club's purposes in championing the history of the book and keeping it vital. And I'm enough of a fossil to appreciate what I grew up with and to hope that it would continue and that there would be opportunities for later generations to discover type on paper and wonderful printing methods which the atelier can do. So it's very personal, but I don't think I'm entirely alone in this.